Gotcha. You'd think that the commander had heard me talk before, but we're going to talk about a time limit or something. I have no intention of speaking about smoke alarms today. Well, that was it, but I'm going to use it as a bit of an introduction. And the reason I say that is because I wrote an article, and many of you may know me from writing articles in the Independent, that Rusty has been so gracious about helping present some of Sun City history, along with writing for a show and newsletters about Sun City history as a self-appointed Sun City historian. But what I wrote about the smoke alarms was the fact that we actually had daylight saving time in Arizona for 1 year. And it disappeared because of our senator from Sun City, who one-man show trumped the whole state around and eating chicken to get enough support to eliminate and get it voted back out, and we've not had it ever since. So it was a story that I had written that Rusty was graciously, and some of you may have read that story. Anyway, I have fun. I'm so excited to come down and help you celebrate your 50th anniversary. I know that for the Posse members, probably within your training, I assume, you got some of the highlights about all the wonderful things that you have done for this community over the years. I don't know that you've got any background of how come you're here. You know, from 1960 to 1973, some pretty interesting years, there was no posse. And then all of a sudden, there was a posse. And it became really a famous posse very, very quickly throughout the United States, thanks to the sheriff, and going to national conferences. So famous that you have commemorated here, I think, somewhere within the building, in the lobby. It even caught the attention of the president's office. And Ronnie Reagan came right here, you know, and made a presentation about the wonderful services of volunteer organization that you've made to the community and to the area. But today I'm going to, as fast as I can, I'm going to talk really, really fast, because I know you can listen a lot faster than most people talk. And that's just my habit anyway. But I want to tell you just a little bit of the background about what led up to the creation of the Sun City Posse. We have this information at the museum. Our job down at the Sun City Museum is very, very simple. Our mission statement says, save the history, present the history. My job today. Short version, rapid fire. If you got questions, I'm not going anywhere after. If you got some questions about this, what I say today, or anything else about Sun City history, let me help you out. Okay, where does the story start? 1950, believe it or not, with the U.S. Census. It counted nobody living in Youngtown. Hold that thought, we're coming back there, about why that was important to Sun City. Now let's jump 10 years. 10 years. January 1st, 1960. The day Sun City opened. Nobody living here. Okay? Community completely isolated. Was a big old cotton farm. Still was cotton everywhere from Grand Avenue north up to Bell Road. From Bell Road, it was north up to Beardsley. It was pasture land for sheep and cattle. Over there was Peoria, 2,000 people. 2,000. Glendale, way over there. Bell Road, stopped paving at 59th Avenue. 99th Avenue came up as far as Peoria. I mean, it was out here in the middle of nowhere with nobody living here. By the end of 1960, 1,500 people had moved in. But they did the census in 1960, and they finished in April. And when they counted, there was nobody living in Sun City. By the end of the year, April 28th, 1960, the first people got their keys to their new house. By the end of the year, it was 1,558 people were living here, according to Del Webb's records. A year later, that total was closer to 4,000. Yeah. Well, those first 1,500 people recognized the fact that, hey, this is going to grow really fast. By the way, Youngtown was looking across to 111th Avenue, and seeing all this activity and saying, oh my God, what's going to happen next door? And what if those people, is going to be huge, want to annex us? Because you didn't have to ask permission from your neighbors back in those days. If you were bigger, you could gobble them. So they were very, very nervous about that. 1960 census counted people for Youngtown. They had 300 or 400 people. The very first thing they did is they formed the city of Youngtown. Now why? They knew what could happen across the street. And they knew that if they were a city, they could not be annexed. Now, lest you worry about that, knowing the fact that we all know the fact that Sun City is not a city. It's never been a city, and it's unlikely it's ever going to be a city, unless something that we can't anticipate should happen. Now, what happens when 1,500 people come in here and they get thinking about it? You know, at some point in time, we're going to have to get this place organized, and we're going to have some mechanism to talk to Maricopa County, to the Sheriff's Department, and the Zoning Department, and all those people, and to the state government and all of that. Let's elect some representatives. That happened in December of 1960. They formed a group with two jobs. One, talk to the government. Two, talk to the rec department of Del Webb, because they owned the only rec center. A rec center that had voluntary members. Wow, that's the two jobs. That, they formed an organization. It's an organization that 1 month later split and became Showa and the recreation centers of Sun City. Through a very long process and through two different name changes, but that's what's left over today. They split. Now, here's what happened. 1 year later, they built Fairway, didn't call it that then, they quit. And Del Webb changed his mind and said, we made a terrible mistake with that first part of Sun City. We made membership in the rec center voluntary. They changed it for the second rec center. And they made it mandatory. Facilities agreement, we all signed one when we moved here. But they couldn't go back and change around. Well, actually it's around where the museum is. Grand Avenue just south, 103rd over to 111th Avenue. Couldn't change those two plots. So now we've got two recreation centers, one group who represents the governmental concerns, and they don't talk to each other and they don't let each other use their own facilities. And they're thinking, maybe we ought to have a city and become organized. And we could have a city recreation department, we could have a city police department, and we could have, because they saw over in Youngtown, as soon as it became a city, they formed their own, well, I don't know, it was exactly a police department. They had one employee, and in those days they called him a marshal. They had a marshal for the city of Youngtown. Well, people thought, well, maybe we ought to have our own recreation department, our own fire department, our own police department, because they all had moved here like we did, for places where I used to know the Green Bay Police Department, and the Green Bay Fire Department, and the Green Bay Recreation Department, and they would all be run by the government. And so they got talking about that. Maybe we should incorporate. Are you aware of the fact that we actually voted to incorporate or not to incorporate December 1st, 1964? The county came out and ran the election. Now, here was the problem. What was the census for Sun City in 1960? Zero. What determined how much money you got back from sales taxes, all the various taxes, and the government shared taxes? Population. So, okay, Sun City incorporates in 1964, The total amount of income from governmental sources, zero. Where does it go? Property tax. So they held the election. 28% said, yes, let's incorporate. 72% said, no thank you. Well, that means, we're going to have to continue, depending on the county, sheriff's department, they're out here from downtown, no surprise office in those days. We had to depend on Maricopa County budget for police services and all that, and the budget for a growing area was always lagging. They couldn't keep up with our population demands. And people were noticing, and there was reports, and we started to have newspapers, can you imagine that? Our own newspapers. And they were reporting crime statistics. And there was more and more conversation about that. And about, are we having adequate, are we getting what we're paying for in our property taxes? And there was, around the swimming pools and in the clubs of Sun City, there was more and more chatter about maybe we should have some sort of police services, but we're going to have to become a city. Maybe we're going to have to go back and revisit that subject. Well, that happened. But in the meantime, recognizing the dissatisfaction of the community, in particular about, is there enough police presence? Some entrepreneurs stepped forward. A retired policeman from Denver and one from Philadelphia decided they were going to get together and offer a private police service. And they were going to charge people by the month. They said, people are used to this. You are paying by the month. There was no fire department then. We paid $1 a month to rural metro fire department to come and answer a fire call if we had one. And almost everybody did that, Chief. But rural metro was allowed, anybody who didn't pay $1 a month, they were allowed to charge them up to 17 times their cost by state law for answering a call. That was an incentive. We were paying a garbage service, so we're used to that sort of thing. We were paying a recreation fee by the month, so we were used to that. So why not your own private police force? And it really didn't gain any traction at all, because there was still talk about maybe someday we are going to become a city. 1970 comes. We have another census. Population is now bumping 20,000. Sun City homeowners decides maybe we got to run this question back one more time. But let's not get the county involved in doing an election. How about if we'll just do a kind of a straw poll in the community? It's a good way for us to increase our membership. Because to vote in the straw poll, you got to be a member of show up. It was a great recruiting tool. Because they picked up about 3,000 members in 1 month. People wanted to vote. People were actually asked 5 different ways. 5 different ways. 1, would you like to just continue this relationship with the county about being an unorganized, unincorporated area of Maricopa County, living under a group of loose ordinances indefinitely? That was the first question, as we have for the last 11 years. Second question, do you think that we should incorporate now? Third question, should we incorporate when phase 2 all the way up to Bell Road is complete? And then there were 2 other questions. The answers for all 5 questions were virtually the same. Hell no! Well, how resounding was it? Well, most people today consider if you get 60% of the people to say yes or no on something, that's like a landslide. Out of every 100 votes, all 5 questions. 95 out of 100 votes, 95 said, no, we do not. Show has issued a press release saying, incorporation, it's dead and it's buried. Forget it. And amended their bylaws to say, thou shalt never, ever talk about incorporation again or take a position. I believe it's, Michael, I don't know if you can check it, I think it's still there, the bylaws. It was when I was president of Showa a bunch of years ago. Well, what happened? The county has said, a group of county officials came out to Sun City in 1973, 2 years later, and said, look, you guys are now close to 30,000 people. You need to have a disaster plan, just in case there's some kind of a disaster in Sun City. Showa hosted that meeting. They invited our brand new hospital, Walter O. Boswell Hospital representatives, to come, to meet with Showa, to meet with the county, to meet with some people from the rec centers, and think about this. Should we do something in case we have a real first-class community emergency? Well, Showa said, tell you what, I think there's interest. Let's form one more committee, the Emergency Services Committee for Sun City. And they sat down, they got right to work, and they came out with a 4-pronged program. 1, we need some deputy help for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department, something called a posse, and started putting out advertisements to recruit members into the Sun City Posse. That was the beginning. And that happened in the first week of September 1973. Second, we'll organize a group of first aid responders. We're going to recruit retired nurses and people from the health profession, and we're going to train them in emergency first aid in case of a big, I don't know if the airplane was going to fall on Sun City or the earthquake like they're having in Turkey today or whatever, but they needed to have a group, ready. They needed to have some communications. They formed 8 guys had radio licenses in Sun City. They immediately volunteered to work as a network and an organized communication with the outside world in case we got isolated by some event or some big disease or something out here that struck only people over 55. I don't know, COVID or something, I don't know. The 4th was they thought they should get retired firemen and form a fire department auxiliary for retired firefighters and people who would be firefighters when they grew up. You guys were the only survivors of that. The very first meeting of the Sun City Posse volunteers to be September 13th, 1973 at the Show's brand new office over on Coggins. And interestingly enough, I think I dropped off an article here at one time, I believe on that agenda, with some cross-training for the first aid people, because they did some CPR and things of that sort. But they also had some reps there from the Sheriff's Department talking about procedures and reminding people that, hey, this isn't like you're going to get in a car somewhere and chase bad guys around or something of this sort, but maybe become the eyes and ears of the community. Well, the growth was extraordinary. The idea caught on. The volunteer group rapidly grew to 60, and 80, and 100, and it far outstripped Showa's ability to be able to host that. And they had to get the rec centers involved in hosting training sessions. and most of them were done all by the sheriff's department until they were ready to get their first official uniforms, a whistle and a plastic hat. Not even coveralls then, just the two. And to, be ready to go out and become the eyes and ears of the community. They had to be, at that time, not only trained, but sworn in by the sheriff's department, as official eyes and ears and helpers and reporters, and to go out and determine how they were going to do their thing. It wasn't long, within 1974, I think in January of 74, I have this all in my own private notes somewhere, which is all going to be preserved in a searchable database and available for anyone everywhere in the future. Got a call from the sheriff saying, need some help on night patrols. The first request from the sheriff's department. Now you got to think about that. We have as our identification our hat and our whistle, and we were instructed to keep a pocket full of dimes, because we had no radios or communications, and if we saw something by a list that was provided of suspicious cars that have been around lately, we were to stop at the nearest payphone. Now where would you go today for that? Which would be an interesting challenge. So that was the first request. But I'm sure that within your own history, I really don't know what you have for your history here, but I'd love to take a look at it and maybe even supplement that. Other requests followed, and some of them were pretty big requests. When the USS Arizona remnants of the ship came to the state capitol on loan, they needed some guards. Sun City Posse went down and serviced that. When the big bridge washed out between Sun City and Sun City West, it was washed out and it was down the bank, up the bank, the other side, they needed patrol help there. The posse donated thousands of hours of manpower until that bridge was built. Now that doesn't happen overnight, you design a bridge and build it. So they were on duty 24 hours a day for a long time. Then it came to the Christmas shopping guards at Arrowhead shopping mall, and all kinds of exposures. And it was just the beginning. Just the beginning of 25 years of volunteer work by one of the most important, most visible groups within our community. And for those of us who have lived here, like I have for 25 years, and have benefited from what you have done for this community, we couldn't be more grateful. We are just so happy that you invited us today to be part of your 50th anniversary. And I think we may even have something more. This is my gift to you today, to give you a little bit of your history. I have it all written out, if you'd like to add it to your own, if you have your own history. I also have some articles, pictures of articles about the posse that appeared back in '73 for your first training sessions and things that you can add to your scrapbook of the history of Sun City that you may want to use someday with training your new people. And give them a little background and know that you've got over 50 years of history to represent and be proud of. And so thank you for the opportunity to come today to represent the museum, to indicate to you that, yeah, we're pretty serious about what we do down there, about saving our history, presenting our history to the community, and if you haven't been down there, come down and see us real quick. Put it on your agenda. Thank you for that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Our historian can go on for hours.
Usually does.
Yeah. I want to share with you how much I appreciate you guys as a posse, because I'm number one on the phone call list